Welcome to the Empress in Victoria, BC, one of the best places to slow down and enjoy a beautiful afternoon tea. Today, Ken and I are taking a rare weekday break to indulge in this tradition together, and as we do, we thought we'd share something that's been on our minds, planning for our empty nest years. For many years, our desire to live a bi-continental lifestyle has been shaped and often limited by the school schedule. But now that our boys are getting older, with just a few short years left at home, we're realizing how close we are to a whole new chapter of life. It's exciting and nostalgic and maybe even a little bit uncertain. But more than anything, it's an opportunity to be intentional, to design a life that feels rich and fulfilling and uniquely ours. So pour yourself a cup of tea, settle in, and let's talk about what's next. Right now, life feels busy, but full. Between raising teenagers, running a business, and managing a household, every day feels like it's spoken for. But lately, we've been pausing to take it all in. These moments of family life, our kids at this pivotal stage, and the shared chaos of it all.
It's not that we're wishing for the next few years to go away, because we know these are good years, and we know that we'll miss them when they're gone. But we also know it's a good idea to plan ahead and design that next phase of life and what it's going to look like. The empty nest stage is a big transition, but it's also an opportunity to recapture some of what our life looked like when we first got married, before we had kids, which is pretty exciting. It's definitely going to take a shift in mindset to start thinking about doing things without the kids, where it's just back to Kim and I.
So what does the next chapter look like? Well, for starters, if you do a casual Google or YouTube search for empty nest, it's mostly all about empty nest syndrome, which has a very negative connotation. It seems like this is something that's going to be unpleasant, that you need to survive. What's not presented as often is the positive side of things, but that is what we want to focus on. For me, it's about focusing on the things that I've always wanted to do, but never had the time for. I've been dreaming about becoming a more proficient golfer, something I've only dabbled in before. I also want to become fluent in French and then Italian. Languages have always fascinated me, and I want to take that passion further. There's also the idea of spending more time in the UK and Europe. Currently, we're really only able to spend our summers there because of the school schedule, but that's not always going to be the case.
For me, it's also about travel, just the two of us, and not just during the summer or spring break. And we're not talking about retirement. We're not planning to stop working or becoming less productive anytime soon, but it's about having a little more freedom and flexibility in our schedules. So if we wanted to go golf or play tennis or hockey during the day, we could do that. I've always wanted to learn how to play an instrument, so maybe I could get around to doing that. But really, it's just looking forward to recapturing a little bit of, time in our day that currently doesn't exist.
It's amazing how quickly this time with kids goes by. We have heard many times that the days are long and the years are short, and it is so true. It feels like yesterday that I couldn't make a move without a kid or two in tow. The memories of doing absolutely everything with a baby Bjorn attached to me are still surprisingly fresh. And then I remember the very first day I took my oldest son to preschool before his brother was born, and I came home and the house was so strangely quiet. It was weird. And now here we are. It won't be all that long before that's the norm. Just the two of us in the house together and both boys off doing their own thing.
Approaching this phase of life isn't a sudden thing. It's not like you go from your kids needing you 24/7 to not needing you at all. I mean, it's only been recently that the kids stay up later than we do, which has been an interesting change for us. And it's gradual that way. It's a transition as they become less dependent on us. And it's a transition that's been going on for years. I remember the first time we went to see a movie together, just the two of us, no kids and no babysitter. That was a huge moment. The untethering that was happening was right in front of our eyes, and it's been going on ever since. So in a way, we sort of been preparing for this all along without realizing it. But we also want to be more intentional about planning for the next step. Intuitively, what you're doing all along as a parent is building your kids' independence. But what you're not doing is planning for your own return to independence. So let's talk about that next.
Planning for this phase takes thought, intention, and honestly, a little courage. It's a big shift, but there are steps that we're taking now to make the transition smoother. Over our afternoon tea, we talked about the 3 key assets that we would need to have going into these empty nest years. The first one is health, and that's because honestly, without that, nothing else matters. You can make all kinds of plans for the things that you want to do, but if you're not healthy or functional enough to do those things and enjoy them, then it's not going to work. We can dream about going back to Rome, but if we just can't walk up the Spanish steps, it's not going to be the same. Or playing a round of golf, or whatever it is that we want to do. It's the sort of thing that we took for granted in our 20s. We all do that, I think. But it's always made me uneasy when I think about people delaying all the good stuff for when they're retired, because there's no guarantee of anything. There's no guarantee, but there are definitely things that you can do to protect that first asset, our health. And that's why staying active and exercising regularly and being mindful about healthy eating, we think of these things as investments.
And speaking of investments, that's the second asset that we talked about that we need to prioritize is wealth. And we wouldn't be sitting here having this tea if we didn't have some money saved up. Maybe we won't be able to sprint up the steps into temples in Chiang Mai like we did in our 20s, but what we might be able to do is afford a nicer hotel than the dive we stayed at when we went to Thailand. With that in mind, you want to start planning for what those empty nest years will look like financially. For us, this isn't retirement, as we said before, so we still have income. So it's not exactly retirement planning, but it is really important to have a vision of what you want your empty nest years to look like. And at the same time, balance your lifestyle with the fact that you still need to be saving for retirement. Ideally, you want to start planning financially well in advance of this stage. Saving for post-secondary education for your kids, for example, that's something that we started doing when our kids were really young, and we're so happy that we did that. Because even though it was hard at the time, because money was a lot tighter, it's really paying off now. When it comes to investing, time is your greatest ally. Also think about your home life. Will you downsize, renovate, or even relocate? These are big decisions, and they take time to plan.
The third asset that we talked about over tea was relationships. So our connection with our kids, our partners, and even ourselves. As we head into this next phase of life, we realize that it's really important to be intentional about how we nurture these relationships. So we came up with a simple 3-step process to take stock of these 3 different relationships and make a plan for cultivating healthy relationships in the empty nest years. Now, obviously, we're not actually in our empty nest years yet, so we would love to hear from those of you who have actually gone through it. But here's what we're thinking going in. First, I think it's important to start with yourself. Who are you outside of parenting? After years of focusing on your kids, it's really easy to lose sight of your own identity. So I'm asking myself, what excites me? What do I want to explore next? Second, we think it's important to have open and honest conversations with your partner. What kind of life do you both want in this next chapter? What dreams do you share? And what independent pursuits do you each want to follow? And finally, staying connected with your kids, we suspect, does not happen by accident. It's going to take intention. But just because they're leaving home doesn't mean that they're leaving your life. We're going to put some effort into planning family traditions and regular visits and even simple ways to check in to ensure that those relationships stay strong, no matter where life takes them or us. This afternoon at the Empress has been such a treat, not just for the tea, but for the conversation. As we get closer to our empty nest years, I've realized that planning for this next phase isn't just necessary, it's actually exciting. Taking the time to dream about what's ahead helps to balance that bittersweet feeling of watching our kids grow up and move on. I'm so glad that we carved out this time together. It gave us a little glimpse into what life might look like when it's just the 2 of us again. And honestly, I think we're going to love it. We're not in a rush for this next chapter, but it is coming. And instead of just letting it happen, we want to be intentional so that when the time comes, we step into it with excitement, not uncertainty.
And in the wise words of Ferris Bueller, life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.